So I just got back from a mountain boarding event in Cedar Ledge, Pennsylvania. I live in Santa Cruz County, California, and you know, um, dealing with an electric mountain board and traveling across the country brings some unique challenges. So originally, I was looking at just shipping the battery and taking the board with me, on the airplane. I had limited knowledge, but I knew that you can't take the batteries on an airplane. I flew with Delta Airlines, and I checked their oversized and overweight, luggage check-in fees, and it was going to run about $700 round trip to take my board on the airplane, minus the battery. So, I figured, well, I could probably ship it, across the country, cheaper than that, which it worked out. Actually, it was about the same price. I shipped the board was about $350 each way. I did I paid for the extra insurance. The electric mountain board runs, 4,500, and I also had a, $500 super fast smart speed charger. So just in round numbers, this was a $5,000 investment. After finding out, how much it was going to cost to take it on the airplane, I figured I'd just box everything up and take it to the nearest UPS store. That's for me, it's in Santa Cruz, California. So they, I didn't just, I disclosed all the information, told them the small box contained a lithium battery that was, for the electric skateboard, and then the large box contained the board and accessories. So they had no problem, processing, the fees. Actually, the battery box to ship that one way, they charged me a little over $100, and like I said, it was $350 for the board, and ran into some problems. It was maybe a week or so after I shipped. I was checking the tracking, and the battery was still at a location in California, and the board, actually, it took about a week to deliver. It arrived in Massachusetts. I kept checking into why the battery was stuck in San Pablo, California, which was about 80 miles or so from here. And I finally was able to see there was a hazardous warning placed on this item. So I checked with the UPS store and told them, obviously we're having an issue with my battery shipping. And now this is already now a couple weeks in. And they said they would look into it and get back with me, and that took a couple of days. So, they told me basically, well, there wasn't anything they could do about it. And, the one thing I knew is I had placed insurance. So it's like, well, if I was going to be able to place a claim if anything happened and I, didn't receive the battery. But my main concern was getting across the country and entering this mountain board competition. This was the first, U.S. Electric mountain board race, and I wanted to be a part of it. I had invested a lot of time and money, so I quickly had to pivot and come up with another plan, because now I'm only a couple weeks out. I had really allowed 1 month to ship my equipment, and so I figured, well, and you're probably wondering why there's 2 boxes. I bought a new battery. So I knew this battery wasn't leaving California. The people at the UPS store in Santa Cruz, even though they tried their best, they weren't knowledgeable about hazardous materials and what was needed. They took the item, they processed it, they took my money, but then, it got stuck at a distribution center 80 miles away. So to quickly pivot, I contacted a close friend of mine in Colorado, asked him if he was driving to the event, and he was. So I contacted the company, MBS, to see if they had the 1080 battery in stock, and they had a couple. So I was able to purchase this, have them hold it for PT, my good friend that picked it up, and then he drove it to Pennsylvania. And so I was very fortunate. Wanted to thank MBS and PT for their extra effort that it took for me to really be able to experience the Cedar Ledge event, and I'll share some more stories and about that in a future video. So this UPS store, they called me up. This is now like 3 weeks in, and they said, well, they were going to have to drive 80 miles each way. So with traffic and stuff, it was like a 3-hour drive each way. And it's going to take the owner, pretty much a whole day to go pick up this box and bring it back to a store so I could be returned my electric mountainboard battery. And so there was a sticker here on the box that states hazardous materials, dangerous goods, rejection checklist enclosed. And there was a piece of paper, doesn't say too much on it. I thought the interesting information was the 2 dates. So June 11th, 2026 is have H. So I think that's when they labeled it as hazardous. And then it was picked up, or there's a R for return, on July 2nd, 2026. So yeah, they had the board for, they had the battery for nearly 3 weeks. And glad to get that home. So, I really wanted a backup battery anyhow, especially I have a backpack that will fit this comfortably, and I can definitely double the range out on the trails. There's the last time I went riding here locally, I barely coasted in to my parking spot near a trailhead, and I had just reached the maximum range I could on that terrain and on that day. So having a spare battery and taking away that range anxiety, was something I really wanted. The battery's $1,400, so it was a big investment. Getting a second one. I was really going to do it probably near the end of the year, but I wasn't going to miss out on the mountain boarding event in Pennsylvania. So MBS, they offered me a 10% discount, so that also helped a little bit. And yeah, really stoked. So now that I'm back home and got all my boards and batteries, I got to do a little bit of charging and maintenance. So I'll get working on that. So yeah, getting the board out there was just, I didn't want to have to carry all this, on the airplane. I already had a pretty large bag with, all my gear, all my protective equipment, clothes, and various stuff. So shipping the board, was really important. And but yeah, $700 round trip, and that's not including the battery. So I do plan on going back to Pennsylvania in 2 years. So there'll be another mountain boarding competition, be another event or gathering at Cedar Ledge. And it's a pretty special place. Yeah, the people are extremely generous and just great people. And then the terrain was challenging, just super fun. Everybody loves it out there, and I highly encourage anyone thinking about, that hasn't been there. You want to put 2028 and or 2030 on your calendars. It's going to be pretty amazing. So I'll just go through this real quick, but I had the supercharger. This here's the 1050 watt charger. It's a speed charger. I'll do a review kind of comparing the standard stock charger with this in the future, but I've packed that up. I actually wanted to bring a backup charger anyhow. So I have, on the trip, I took both types of chargers. And then we had the board in there. I had the bindings. I threw in some tools, had some miscellaneous tools, the remote. Here's the other charger that I brought, and then the wheels. So yeah, luckily I had saved all the original packaging, which made this great for shipping the board all the way across the US of A. So yeah, when all was said and done, it cost me about $2,000, $700 round trip shipping the board, and then unfortunately buying a spare battery, having a friend drive that out both ways from Colorado to Pennsylvania and back. And then MBS shipped me that same battery back here home, here in Santa Cruz, California. So yeah, quite an experience. I have to figure out how I'm going to do it differently in 2 years. So I got to do a little more research, come up with a plan and strategy, and I'll try to keep you all informed. And but it was well worth it. The experience, of riding with other, electric mountain boarders. I've gotten to do that here locally a little bit, but I mean, these were experienced competitors. So that was pretty special. And again, I'll do another video really going into detail of how special the Dirty 30 mountain boarding event held at Cedar Ledge, Pennsylvania really was. So until then, have a great day.